A little less than a month ago, the Bucks employed a very unique defensive strategy to hold the Rockets to 94 points and to limit Harden to 23 points. And I was so interested in this strategy that I made a video on it. I showed how the Bucks executed this strategy, and thank you guys for making this my most popular video already. Now fast forward to the first round of the playoffs, and the Jazz have tried a very similar strategy to what the Bucks tried, and it's gaining a lot of attention. Unfortunately for the Jazz, this strategy has not worked at all, as Harden has gone off and the Jazz are getting crushed. And as you can see in these clips, what the Jazz are doing, giving Harden a drive to his right, is quite extreme. And so based on what has happened in these two games, there are questions that must be asked. Was what the Bucks did a fluke? Can this strategy only work with a great defender on Harden like Eric Bledsoe? Well, let's get to it. Let's start with on-ball defense, and let's review exactly what the Bucks did in this game. So Bledsoe, he gets to the side of Harden, he gets his hands up, and notice how his body and his feet are facing toward the sideline. So it's a very extreme level of positioning, and here it works out as he blocks Harden on the drive. And much of the time, the Jazz defended him the exact same way. So here Royce O'Neal defends him in a pretty identical way to what Bledsoe just did, and when Harden puts it on the floor, he misses the floater here. Now the thing is, the Jazz, especially in game 2, did not do that the whole time. And here's a great example. So Harden brings it up, and we see Rubio's positioning. So he's clearly forcing Harden right, but it's not nearly as drastic compared to what Bledsoe was doing. Rubio is actually in front of Harden, and we see his feet and his body are facing more toward half court than to the sideline. And the result is this opens up the step back jumper, because now when Harden looks to drive, Rubio tries to stay with him, and Harden is able to shake him by stepping back, and he creates a wide open three. Again, look at the difference in positioning, quite different than George Hill or Bledsoe getting basically behind Harden. Now, all Harden has to do is put on some moves, Rubio does his best to stay with him, and now you see Rubio is basically straight up with Harden, defending him in a normal manner. And when Harden sees that, he goes to his step back, game over. This time, it's Ingles who gets switched on to Harden, and just watch how he does shade Harden right, but by staying in front of him, he allows for that step back jumper. Now when we go back to the Bucks game, we see that there is a big difference. Hill gets completely on the side of Harden, making a step back three a very difficult proposition. His one job is to take away that step back three. That's the emphasis. If he allows Harden to drive, he's done his job. On-ball defense-wise, that's the difference, and it was a big one. O'Neal is guarding Harden on this play, and we see that he's just too anxious to try to stick with Harden on the drive. So when Harden takes a step in, all of O'Neal's momentum is going toward the basket, which frees up a step back three. And Harden getting these step back opportunities is a big deal. This is what the Bucks were trying to take away, but the Jazz let him have too many of these threes, and in these two games he feasted on them. Quinn Snyder is a fantastic coach, but he deserves some blame here. Particularly in game 2, he told the Jazz defenders not to go as extreme as what we saw in the Bucks game, and it backfired. So I would blame the game plan a bit, but I would also blame the execution. Here for example, I know this is not what the coaches wanted. O'Neal is playing Harden straight up for some reason, completely deviating from the game plan, and predictably Harden shakes O'Neal and gets an open three. This time it's Sefolosha who picks Harden up, plays him straight. This gives Harden the option to take the step back three, and then Sefolosha makes things 10 times worse by fouling Harden on the step back, and Harden made the shot. So to me, it was a combination of not enough emphasis on taking away Harden's step back, and then also execution. Here for example, see if you can spot the mistake. What is Donovan Mitchell doing wrong? Well, his hands aren't up. We saw Bledsoe every time his arms were up or at least off of Harden. Mitchell here, on the other hand, gets his hand stuck in the cookie jar, and Harden is able to draw a foul and get 3 free throws, which is a no-no defensively. Now, when Harden wasn't taking step back threes, he drove to his right, so let's talk about help defense, and again let's bring it back to the Bucks. What I want you to watch on this play is the positioning of Brook Lopez. On the drive, he's pretty conservative in his help. He'll step up, but he's keeping an eye on both Harden and Capela. He doesn't venture too far from the restricted area. Then Wilson also comes to help a bit, and then Middleton makes a nice rotation to that corner to intercept the pass. Now compare that to what Rudy Gobert does here. When Harden drives, Gobert steps up rather high, almost to the dotted line, and when no Jazz defender helps on Capela, it allows for the easiest alley-oop of the night. The Jazz force Harden right, and it's amazing to me how aggressive Gobert is with this help, and there are significant ripple effects. Because he's coming out so high, Sefolosha, the weak side defender, has to pretty much try to box Capela out on the help, which means that on a kick-out pass to Tucker, Sefolosha wouldn't be able to recover in time. Add in the fact that Mitchell doesn't make the rotation we saw Middleton make to that corner, and it's a wide open corner 3 for a pretty good shooter. Gobert again helps high, which this time leaves Rubio on the help to battle with Capela, but Rubio is just too small and Capela gets the alley-oop. Now, what did the Bucks give up by dropping Lopez so far back? Well, they gave up floaters, and Harden hit a few in this game, but it was something the Bucks were willing to live with, and if I'm the Jazz, I'd take a good long look in the mirror and think about if I'm willing to let Harden take these shots. Now, one other thing I saw Lopez do a few times that I liked was this. So he actually comes up to help pretty high, but on the drive, notice how he starts to backpedal, sort of like if he was containing the pick and roll. And this allows him to do his best to contain both Harden and Capela at the same time. And it works here, as on the pass to Capela, notice how he's able to recover to Capela, and giving up that hook shot is something the Bucks will live with. Compare that to what Gobert does here. When Harden drives, he comes up as the drive is happening. This gives him no chance to recover and try to prevent the lob to Fareed when he doesn't receive the proper help. And to show the difference between the Bucks and the Jazz when it came to aggressive or conservative help, let's look at this stat. So I tracked Capela's alley-oops or dunks in the half court, and in 2 playoff games versus the Jazz, he had 7 dunks or alley-oops. And in that most recent regular season game versus the Bucks, he had 0. So right there, that's the value in having Lopez being conservative when it came to help. It was interesting, so garbage time at the end of game 2, we saw a little more of Gobert not coming too high to help. So Harden drives, and notice how Gobert stays more toward the restricted area. He's much lower. And this allows him to guard 2 guys at once, which is what he's good at. Harden doesn't have an easy decision, and Gobert uses his length to break up an alley-oop. And the next possession, Gobert again doesn't come too far to help. He also receives some weak side help from Georges Niang. Remember, this is garbage time. But Niang is able to stay behind Capela, and on the pass to Tucker, he recovers to contest well. So, in summary, the Bucks and Jazz had similar strategies, and on the surface they looked the same. But they had significant differences in execution when you dig deeper, and while the Bucks certainly benefited from having Bledsoe and Giannis, it had a lot to do with positioning, rotations, all of that stuff as well. Also, it's hard to blame one single person in particular on the Jazz for their execution, but I will say I don't think Quinn Snyder did a great job in terms of preparing his team to guard Harden. Now, quick question, was the Bucks game a fluke? Not really. It was a bit of a fluke when you consider the fact that the Rockets were a bit cold that night and they missed a lot, but the strategy with their execution is legit, and when you look at it from a game plan perspective, take away Harden threes and take away Capela's dunks at the rim, it's sound, and that's something to build off of. Now, what should the Jazz do to defend Harden? Well, they could execute the same strategy, but they have to do it much better, of course, or the other option I'd consider is to trap Harden, get it out of his hands, try to make someone else create. And lastly, to increase your basketball IQ as a player, coach, or hardcore fan, go to smarterbasketballplayer.com to learn about my new online program. Link in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.